Welcome to Chapter 16, India. So some of the ideas that you're going to see for Chapter 16 is how India is recovering through a chaotic situation. Up until this time, the Gupta were doing really well, and they're going to be taken over by the White Huns. So in this situation, you'll see how they reorganize. Obviously, the caste system is still there, which is a major continuity. You'll see that Hinduism becomes the dominant religion of this particular case. And also you'll see that Islamic influence comes into India through a variety of ways. It's really important that you guys focus on how Islam comes into India and how it affects society and vice versa. Also, you're going to see what happens to Buddhism. It'll kind of fade away a little bit more, but it'll still be there. And then obviously the Indian Ocean trade system is going to be thriving, which is again the monsoon system. And the monsoon system connects into Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and it's really important that you understand that trade pattern. So you have a type of invader that comes into India called the White Huns. They're going to disrupt India big time, very similar to what happened with Rome and all the Germanic tribes. You're going to see the Mongols starting to hit other places in Asia and Persia, vice versa. So keep in mind, always know who the decline is for each type of society or region. In this case, you're going to see that they're a steppe type of people. And again, steppe refers to the harsh areas of Central Asia, kind of like modern-day Mongolia. Not very much vegetation going on, a pastoralist type of lifestyle. Keep in mind also that these White Huns are going to cause lots of issues because they have strong cavalry horses. They're very good on their horses and being able to mobilize and go really quick. They are going to do terrible things to Buddhists. They're going to persecute them, burn down their monasteries, which is very similar to another guy that we'll talk about named Mahmud of Ghazni. They will go into a major city called Pataliputra. We've discussed this as a major city, and so they will ravage that, and it'll show how weak India is at this particular time. Harsha becomes a really important person to know because they are going to compare and contrast this guy to Charlemagne from medieval Europe. And again, he temporarily restores rule. Very similar to Ashoka Maurya when we talk about the Mauryan dynasty of India. And again, this guy has some contributions to history. One of them being that he was very strong with military, so he was able to conquer a lot of territory. Keep in mind that not only were cavalry units were used with horses, but also war elephants. And we will discuss war elephants more when we talk later about the Mughal dynasty. But again, elephants are a cherished type of animal in Indian society, and they will show up quite a bit regarding warfare. Keep in mind that he does convert to Buddhism, very similar also to Ashoka Maurya, and at the same time is kind of a very progressive man for the time period. You're going to see that he creates hospitals to give free medical care to people, which is a big deal. We still have issues with this in modern day in many different countries. But also at the same time, really into the arts. You want to leave your legacy as a major ruler by leaving lots of artwork and statues of yourself. Was very interested in plays, so of course these plays would probably be about conquest and about how great of ruler he was. And keep in mind, he also toured his subjects and communities to make sure that no one was going to overtake him, which is very important to be a strong ruler, is that you kind of have a check on everybody to make sure that they're following in the rules. Keep in mind, low crime rates. Unfortunately, he fell victim to an assassin, and of course, after he passes away, the area where he rules, which is northern India, is going to suffer again and be very chaotic, similar to what happened to Qin Shi Huangdi in China when he passed away. The southern areas of India are going to pop up on the test possibly, and the AP exam does like to talk about them once in a while. This is called the Chola Kingdom. This is in the deep south of India. And you're going to see that they take over areas called Ceylon, which is modern-day Sri Lanka, and other parts of Southeast Asia. So, of course, maritime trade and even conquest on ships as well as land are taking place. Anytime you get into the story of India, when you go deep south, it's going to be deeply Hindu. Always remember this. This is a major continuity. It still is today. if you were to travel down to the southern part of India, you're going to see all kinds of Hindu gods and goddesses all around all the different villages that you go to. Some of them will take more to Vishnu, while others will take more to Shiva, and you'll see temples being built, such as the one that you see to the right-hand side right there. Keep in mind that that architectural monument points towards the sky, and again, each particular door that you see, it's kind of hard to see on this image, has a doorway to a different type of god. And of course the Hindu Trinity, which is really important with Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. You're going to see again that royal roads were actually built to help facilitate trade, very similar to the Silk Road, and of course very similar to the Royal Road of ancient Persia. They are very sophisticated in the sense that they have a standing army and navy. This is a time period in history in the 1000s that you start to hear about standing armies and navies. Believe it or not, Europe won't even have standing armies until much later, and we'll talk about that with England and France. Keep in mind also that India is going to be decentralized, so it goes through ups and downs of being centralized and not for a short time, as we saw with Harsha. But in this particular case, it is decentralized heavily in the southern parts of India, and it will stay that way for quite a long time, even up to the British. Kingdom of Vijayanagar is going to also possibly pop up. Now again, I know some of you are like thinking, my gosh, the names in Indian history are really complicated. It's not so much about the names, it's more about the concepts and the themes of what's happening in southern India. So keep in mind it's deeply Hindu, and you will see some Islamic influence go down into parts of India. So again, you're going to see that there is Islamic influence that moves into the kingdom of Vijayanagar. When you see the term sultan, you're talking about an absolute ruler that's coming in. They are going to bring in Islam, and they're going to appoint a couple brothers by the name of Harihara and Buka as people to kind of facilitate and administer. However, what happens is they start to have their own autonomy and freedom, and eventually they ditch Islam as their main faith and return to the Hindu faith. So of course there's going to be a little bit of disruption here, but keep in mind that they do maintain to become strongly Hindu, and they will powerfully organize. And as you get into the deeper south of India, you're always going to see that it's difficult to hold on to Islamic roots there. So the more northern you go in India, the more Islamic influence. The southern you go, the more Hindu influence. And again, just remember, deep south, strongly Hindu. Can't stress enough how important agriculture in the monsoon world is. There's going to be various ways that they talk about the monsoons, whether it be the Indian Ocean Basin, the monsoons, those are the big ones that they kind of call it. They'll even reference Southeast Asia, Africa, or the Middle East. All of those areas are interconnected regarding the monsoon world. So remember, the Indian Ocean Basin connects to Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, okay, and all, of course, India. So in the case, you're going to see that the monsoons are a seasonal type of pattern. The spring and the summer bring lots of rain to this particular area still today. It would be comparable to like a hurricane or some kind of a typhoon. Keep in mind that Indian people really rely on the monsoons in order to irrigate their crops. And of course, some of you guys made some mistakes regarding that they're so torrential that there's lots and lots of damage. It's not to the same extent as what we see in China with the Huanghe or the Yellow River, but keep in mind that this is more of kind of a dependence on it for crops and things like that. Remind you that with all the stuff that's moving back and forth between the monsoon systems, rice crops, different strains of rice will kind of move around, as well as bananas, which are going to come from Southeast Asia. Anytime you bring a new type of crop into a society, obviously the population is going to go really big. And so there's a major population explosion in this case. And again, that's called demographics. Urbanization refers to cities. So in this case, you're going to see major cities like Surat, Cambay, Calicut, and Quilon. There's a list of major cities, but any city that goes along a port city is going to obviously be part of the monsoon system. Keep that in mind. The trade continues with economics regarding India, and if you were to look at a pirate's chart, always remember that India is going to be heavily economic. The one thing to remember is where certain crops are coming from or what types of things are being traded or what they're self-sufficient for. In this case, you can see regional specialties refer to what's being traded internally, rice, millet, so pretty much like grain crops or cereal crops, as well as things like iron, copper, salt. Pepper is a major one to remember, and spices were not only used for food but also for medicinal purposes, in some cases preservation of food. Temples in society are also economic, so you could always, if an essay came up, temples are always social, economic, and in this case, organized work for people who needed it, revolving around agriculture of all the crops that you see above there, and also irrigation, so building of projects to make sure that they're able to control water and things like that. Very similar to the Romans. Here's a picture of a Hindu temple so that you know what it looks like. Keep in mind some of them are colorful, some of them are not, but again, the door's there and this is where people congregated. So I know in this case you guys are going to get sick of hearing about the monsoon system, but again, here it is. Again, keep in mind that with India, the Indians have been trading with all kinds of people, albeit the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, and they'll even somehow connect even into China and even into the Mediterranean because of all the different varietal products that there are out there. So keep in mind that the dhows, D-H-O-W-S, make sure you know what those are a type of ship that could hold a lot of cargo, about up to 1,500 tons. And so that particular boat was obviously loaded with all kinds of spices, semi-precious stones, and other types of items, possibly some really refined textiles. And again, I do apologize for some of the PowerPoint slides covering up some of the text, but that's what happens when you import certain images for films. You will see that there are types of inns or hotels and lodging on port cities, very similar to the caravanserais on the Silk Roads. So that's really important to mention. And of course, at these types of places, it's very cosmopolitan regarding a city, because not only are you sharing products and religions, but you're also sharing stories, which are very cultural. The person may experience some type of a holiday or a ritual or a marriage, so a lot of cross-cultural diffusion. Keep in mind there are Jewish communities and Christian communities that popped into India, as well as Chinese communities. It's really important to note that, because it just shows that other people are moving away from situations that may be affecting them. For example, if you lived in the Middle Ages in Europe, you had a pretty rigid lifestyle. You couldn't move up in terms of social castes. So what would happen is they would relocate and thrive in a different particular setting. You'll see also that Chinese people are really into just exploring. One of the major people to really open up around the world and talk about stories is a guy by the name of Xuanzang, and we'll talk a little bit about him in a different slide. But keep in mind, high quality textiles, carbon steel, sugar refining, leather tanning, semi-precious stones were all some things that were definitely part of Indian culture, and you'll even find things like porcelain in India, which indicated that they traded with China. So these types of things are super important. So regarding caste and society, caste is a continuity that we'll keep continually talking about regarding India. And anytime you have another type of people coming into society, it could totally disrupt things. We do see this with Islam. Islamic influences are going to come in through conquest, and you're going to see that there are pros and cons. And in this case, if you are from the Middle East or part of one of these Islamic bands of people that came in and took over, it was actually pretty easy to adjust to the caste system, because the caste system said that if you were a warrior, you would naturally be in the Kshatriya class, or if for any reason you were a peasant, you would already have a Vaishya particular caste system to go into. So it was very easy for foreign people to adapt to Indian society because they know where their place was when they arrived, if that makes sense. Keep in mind that Jati is still there, and that's very similar to like a workers' guild of Europe, where, for example, if you're a shoemaker, you would join an organization of shoemakers and kind of collectively talk to each other about things that are going on, etc. And also in society, keep in mind the temples for Hinduism are very important. So most of your boys are getting educated at the Hindu temples. And again, it reinforces a patriarchal society. Employment, we talked about jobs. And also you could be arranged in terms of a marriage. You could meet different families through the temple. And of course, you would partake in things like celebrations for new babies, or even if someone passed away and things like that. Still today, the Hindu temple is very important for a lot of Indian people, as well as you would see any type of other organization, a church, a mosque, any of things of those are still really important to a lot of people, and they go there for various types of events in life. Hinduism is going to start to become really dominant around this time period in history of India. And again, you can argue today that Hinduism is one of the strongest faiths in India today, although there is a lot of other faiths that still exist in India. The Turkish, again, with Islamic influence, are going to come into India. And one of those major ways is through conquest. And in the case, the person that you really need to know is a guy by the name of Mahmud of Ghazni. Make sure that you really understand who this guy is, okay? As they come into India, you're going to see that they have a lack of respect for their traditional culture of India. And so they're going to cut off the heads of Buddhist statues, as well as desecrate Hindu temples and things like that. That's not a great way to showcase yourself as a new invader. Of course, a lot of Indian people held a lot of resentment towards Mahmud of Ghazni. But again, Mahmud was able to take over a lot of territory in a short period of time. Keep in mind that Buddhism was really destroyed because of this Turkish invasion, and eventually, as you get more down towards the southern part of India, you're going to see more people taking to Hinduism. Vishnu and Shiva, again, are going to be two of your major gods that pop up a lot in southern India, and still today, if you were to go there, you're going to see statues and temples everywhere. Again, Vishnu is the preserver of the world. Shiva is kind of this goddess or god of destruction and rebirth and things like that. So you can see Shiva at the top with that circular kind of disc around the god with various hands. Vishnu down on the bottom there, blue. You're not going to be tested on anything heavily like that, but you should know who Vishnu and Shiva are and that it's associated to Hinduism and a lot of stories. In terms of Islam in India, again, still you can see a lot of influences there. So there's a lot of syncretism in India. And again, syncretism refers to blending of various things like religion, food, architecture, art, you name it. But keep in mind, military forces are going to go in. You're going to see merchants and trade routes, an extension of the Silk Road. Keep in mind the Abbasid Empire is one of the Islamic dynasties that was very cultural. And of course, Turkish migrants, such as mentioned with Mahmud of Ghazni. Okay, so that one was really bad in terms of pillaging. And again, you can see some reconnaissance going on in the very beginning part. Reconnaissance, again, is kind of surveying the land, looking at things, and things like that. But again, the Sultanate of Delhi is very critical. You need to really focus on that for test review. It's Islamic government set up in India. So to compare or contrast it, if you remember, the Islamic dynasties went into Spain and they called it Al-Andalusia. In the case of India, it's called the Sultanate of Delhi. And Delhi is the clue right there because, again, it's a major city. Sultan is an absolute ruler, so you can see it's an Islamic government set up in India. Okay, a sultan has absolute power. They're going to enforce things like Sharia law, even the hijabs, which are the kind of covering up of women with headdresses. They're going to put qadis, which are Islamic judges, Sufis, which again were the #1 converters of the faith, and any types of customs like the 5 pillars of Islam, things like that are all going to make its way into India. And you can still see a lot of Islamic influence through architecture, food, dress, and things like that still today. The Taj Mahal is a great example of syncretism that took place in India. Again, many people see the building and just say India, but there's Islamic influence in the whole entire mausoleum, and I'll talk about that in a different section. Mahmud of Ghazni will show up in several chapters, but again, he shows up, and I want to give you enough things about him so that if you had to argue him on a short answer question, you have it. But again, looting all the different types of things like stored up crops, things, maybe some money, currency that was kind of hanging around the temples, those things were taken. And you can see that there was a lot of hatred that was sparked because of this event of him coming in and destroying a lot of the culture, which really starts to showcase an issue that's a continuity today, which Hindus and Muslims started to resent each other. And so still today, unfortunately, there are still conflicts that exist between Hindus and Muslims. The area of Kashmir is one particular location that comes up a lot when studying that, and he will be considered a Islamic hero in the eyes of some of these people that took over. But keep in mind that Indian people will see it as a very painful past story regarding their culture. The conflicts that are happening with Hindus and Muslims still today can be seen in various ways. If you've ever seen the movie Slumdog Millionaire, the very beginning scene shows that, where the neighborhood of the little boy gets raided, and that's an issue regarding Hindus and Muslims. So again, you're going to see that, in terms of the conquest of Mahmud, that was very quick. But most of the Islamic influences were, put into the society over a period of time. So again, you're going to see that the social mobility allowed for a lot of the foreign people to go right into the system and just kind of know where their place was. There were attempts to kind of bridge Islam and Hinduism together, and that is showcased in what's called the Bhakti movement, Bhakti. And it was a cult that kind of emerged in order to erase the differences between Islam and Hindu and to bring more of kind of a syncretism in regards to more peace. And Guru Kabir is the founder of this. You're going to see that we talked about Neo-Confucianism, and it's very similar to Neo-Confucianism, marrying Confucianism and Buddhism together to make it more appealing to people. So keep in mind that adaptation is something that naturally happens when you have all kinds of different people coming in. You want to have peace, and it's very difficult to manage people if it's chaotic. So this is an attempt to bridge the difference. It didn't work out, obviously, so well, but it just shows that there was modifications to try to help people. Going back to Southeast Asia, there's going to be, again, lots of influences from a variety of places regarding Islam, regarding Buddhism, regarding Hinduism. And in this case, you can see that in Southeast Asia, countries like Cambodia, countries like Thailand, possibly even Vietnam, were exposed to a lot of the influences from the monsoon system. So, for example, you can see Cambodia is a good example. The term Raja, R-A-J-A, means king, right, in India. And so that was adopted in many cultures as kind of the ruler's name. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata, again, the two stories, the epic stories that keep showing up a lot. The Ramayana is the one with the monkey god and the one girl that got kidnapped, Sita, and then her husband Rama and the monkey god go and save her. The Mahabharata is about a charioteer and a king, and they kind of have stories all throughout. But again, a lot of cultural values of Hinduism are showcased in these particular epic stories. Angkor Wat is one of the best examples that shows syncretism happening here. And again, you'll see Hindu and Buddhist architecture blended together. You'll see stupas, which are kind of those Buddhist influences of things kind of pointing up towards the sky, Hindu structures, and you'll see all these types of things blended together in the actual building of Angkor Wat. And so we'll show it to you in a second. By the way, Wat means temple, so just kind of keep that in mind, okay? Here's Angkor Wat. This comes up on the AP exam all the time. You can see that looking from an aerial view, there's Buddhist influences of what we see called stupas. The kind of pointy figurine things are stupas, S-T-U-P-A-S, Buddhist style of architecture. And then if you were to go closer in, you would see like Hindu gods and goddesses in the stone reliefs and things like that. It's one of UNESCO protected today. What's really cool about Angkor Wat is it's so old, and you can see that there's like trees growing into some of the structures. Parts of it are dilapidated. It's really dangerous if you go, because sometimes the safety standards in other countries are not the same as what we have in the US. So it's not strange to see people climbing in or going underground and subterranean, which you shouldn't be doing, but it's dangerous. So just be careful if you ever do go, for sure. Even if you go to Thailand, there's a place by the name of Ayutthaya. It's another UNESCO protected area. You can see that there was a time period where another type of people came in and cut off the statues of the Buddha heads, which is really offensive, because Buddha heads, again, the area of the head has lots of enlightenment and nirvana. So the fact that another culture would come in and do something like that really offended the Thai people for the time. Crazy side story is when I did travel to Ayutthaya, it was 113 degrees, as mentioned on that little caption up there, with 85% humidity. So you could not keep dry. It was awfully hot, and so hydrating was absolutely necessary. So if you ever go to Southeast Asia, just remember you need to hydrate. It gets super hot, and some of you definitely cannot handle it. So try it out, but remember, be careful. It's super hot. You'll also see lots of Buddha statues and stuff like that. On the right over there, you can see a stupa. That's a different type of kind of Buddhist architecture. And of course, if you look carefully, you might see some water bottles in front of each Buddha. Some of the Buddhist monks every day put water in front of the Buddhas, and they drape them with the cloth. It's a spectacular sight to go check out. I highly recommend it. But again, the heat is definitely a factor, so be careful. Last text slide shows, again, how we keep talking about Islam coming into Southeast Asia and India. Remember that, again, Muslim merchants along the Silk Road were really responsible for spread of a lot of religion, specifically Islam. Sufis were also really good at that. But keep in mind, you're going to start to hear about Marco Polo. And Marco Polo, again, is going to come up a lot in history books in the next unit. But he'll travel to Indonesia. He sees Islam, which, again, still today, Indonesia is one of the most populous areas for Muslims, so keep that in mind. And also, again, lots of cross-cultural diffusion because of the stories that he brought to Europe. Even modern-day Singapore, which would be Malacca, according to the books in the past, was Hindu, and you'll see that it becomes Islamic. And still today, there's a large Muslim population in the area of Singapore, but it's a big melting pot of all kinds of different ethnicities and cultures and languages and things like that. Thanks for watching this video and understanding a little bit more about India and Southeast Asia and Islamic influences. This video clip here is really good. It's called Lost Treasures. Just pull it up in YouTube, watch it, and again, you can stream this as many times as you need to ensure that you understand it. Good luck on finals, and take care.